The renowned writer and historian William Durand once stated that, quote, "a great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within." Now, those of you who've seen Apocalypto may remember that the movie opens with this exact quote. And it also really shouldn't come as much of a surprise that the mixture of Mel Gibson with a movie that attempts to prove Durand's statement through the fictionalized decline of the Mayan civilization was at the cause of some outbursts from numerous scholars. Stephen Spence from the University of Nebraska writes that, quote, "labeling Gibson the madman would give him too much of a pass. It would be to ignore his unfortunately skilled participation in Hollywood cinema's long history as a tool for discrimination and oppression." But most importantly, a large chunk of these critiques seem to culminate in a climax of the movie with the coming of the Catholic Spaniards. And since the city Mayans are depicted as rotten and cruel, Tracy Ardren interprets this event as, quote, "an offensive and racist notion that Maya people were brutal to one another long before the arrival of Europeans and thus they deserved, in fact they needed, rescue." To be honest, I had a hard time trying to find a single academic article that wasn't overtly negative about this movie, so I figured it was about time for someone to change that. And to do so, we need to start our analysis here. The tapir hunt immediately introduces the audience to the first of the film's main themes and values, which is the hunter versus the hunted relationship. Now, there is a reason why this is important, but I'll get back to that later. The second theme reveals itself as Jaguar cuts off specific parts of the animal and gives them to his fellow hunters. Shortly thereafter, they trade a part of the tapir for some fish caught by another tribe passing by. Giving and sharing are shown to be integral parts of the community's culture. There exists a conscious respect and gratitude for the abundance of the forest, which is shown both non-verbally, by making use of literally every part of the tapir.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
And verbally. Later, during the nighttime feast, the village elder tells the story of the sad man whose sadness could never be quelled, however much the world would give him. The theme of abundance is also extended with the apparent respect for fertility present in the community. Flint Sky speaks of having produced 10 children. Jaguar is a son, his wife is pregnant with their second, and kids run amok in the village. Blunted seems to be the odd one out, as he is unable to impregnate his wife, to the dissatisfaction of her mother. A situation which Mel Gibson then of course utilizes to depict some 16th century pranking. Which brings us to our next two themes, family and joy or peace. With no real hierarchy or class system present, the community seems to function as a sort of big, happy family. In fact, the first act of Apocalypto could almost just as well be mistaken for a feel-good comedy about jolly minds kicking it in the jungle. However, things aren't all hunky-dory, as is evidenced in the introduction of the first opposite theme, which is fear. Jaguar is worried by the encounter with the other tribe as they seem scared and running away from something. His father Flint Sky subsequently explains to him that fear is a sickness. Unfortunately, Jaguar's fears soon become very real as the city Mayans approach the village. And in contrast to the jolly-looking hunter and gatherers, these Mayans look grim and angry. Their leader Zero Wolf is seen using human skulls as part of his warrior's outfit. As sound draws them nearer to the camp, he orders them to split up and sneakily make their way inside. It is here that it becomes obvious that these Mayans are on a hunt, but instead of tapir, fellow humans are to be their prey. Fear is spread like wildfire throughout the village as Zero Wolf's crew capture, kill, and rape their way through the camp. And as they make their way out, the surviving children are left behind. So at the beginning of this second act, the themes of family, love, and fertility are replaced by repressive authority and hateful moral indecency. It is soon made clear that violence and pain are the determining factors of strength in the community of the city Mayan warriors. The extent of the various contrasts between the protagonist's world and the world of his captors becomes especially apparent as the group moves into their part of the jungle, or rather what was once part of the jungle. The abundance, fertility, and all-around feeling of aliveness of the jungle village are replaced by scarcity, infertility, and death. One of the film's most vital and powerful scenes is the encounter with the sickly girl. The warriors have obviously given up any hope of helping those contaminated by what seems to be the plague, as they push the desperate little girl away. She then seems to become possessed by some higher power, which then prophesies the coming of the Spaniards and the end of the Mayan civilization. According to William Durand, the sign of a civilization's decline expresses itself in moral decay. As a group enters a city, it is shown that the sense of community and family has been replaced here by a lack of care for the weak and the old, rampant slavery, theft, and of course the dehumanization of the human body depicted in the sacrifices to the gods. Again, fear and violent authority are shown to be the determining factors of the society. On top of that, their leaders are conscious of this and abuse it to their advantage to rule and subdue their people, as is evidenced by the pre-existing knowledge of the coming solar eclipse. So as Jaguar makes his escape, the board is set and the stakes are clear. Besides being a personal struggle of life and death, both for Jaguar as well as his trapped wife and son, the chase metaphorically also signifies the struggle between the before-mentioned opposite themes and values. Love versus hate, abundance versus scarcity, freedom versus captivity, authority versus family, the hunter versus the hunted, and of course, courage versus fear. And it is exactly in this last aspect in which Jaguar is lacking. After taking a leap of faith, he finally realizes this and decides to let go of his fear, depicted in a scene in which he metaphorically embodies the symbolism of the jaguar, which to some stands for the power to face one's fears and confront one's enemies. It's at that point that he stops being the hunted and retakes the role of the hunter, vanquishing his adversaries one by one.
Buddy, you still there? You just took a hell of a hit!
The most obvious sign of this change in roles, of course, is shown through the death of Zero Wolf by use of the tapir trap. The Jaguar Paw doesn't retake this role for long as the chase ends on the beach and we're back at that controversial climax. And we finally meet the ultimate hunters, who are to become the bringers of unspeakable amounts of death. Of course, as you might have noticed, I don't much agree on the degree of controversy applied to Apocalypto as a whole. As I believe I've shown, the story to me is not at all about justifying or sweet-talking European colonialism in the Americas, but rather about more universal themes and real-life cultural tendencies. Mel Gibson has used several aspects of the Mayan civilization to depict a sort of ahistorical summary of its people's rise and fall. You could even argue that the movie really isn't all that much about the Mayans at all, as Gibson himself has stated that he sees Apocalypto as more of an allegory for modern-day America, with many of the same struggles playing a role in today's society. I would go as far as stating that Apocalypto's story is even more universal than that, and can be seen as a general visualization of William Durand's opening quote. Durand, of course, was speaking of the fall of the Roman civilization, but Gibson being Gibson left some direct references to that time within the story. Both Jaguar as well as another character are shown to have been wounded in the right side of the abdomen. This, combined with the fact that the group is being marched off to be sacrificed, unmistakably brings to memory one of Gibson's other protagonists. And right before this is all about to go down, Blunton's mother-in-law has a brief Maria moment, straight out of the Passion of the Christ. So in the end, I believe there's far more substance to Apocalypto than just a chase scene and a quote-unquote racist message. It's an action movie with great cinematography and one of the best chase sequences in Hollywood cinema's history foremost, but in its core it remains a deeply relevant story about a universal moral struggle and the cycle of rise and fall and hunter and hunted. And although the movie of course depicts the apocalypse or the beginning of the end for the Mayan civilization, it also, and perhaps more importantly, leaves us with a message of hope, to stick to our morals, to face the future, and to have the courage to start it all over. Alright guys, that's the end of our analysis for Apocalypto. I hope you enjoyed. I had a bit of a hard time tackling this video because there basically weren't any articles that agree with my view of the movie. Anyways, what did you think of Apocalypto? I would love to hear your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. As always, if you like what we do and want more, or just feel like helping us out a bit, check out our Patreon page and or share this video with the rest of the world. I want to thank you again for watching, Happy New Year, and I hope to see you all again in 2017.